Hello, hi everyone. I do want to be respectful for everyone's time. I want to thank you guys for joining us once again for another campus-wide update. I did want to do a little bit of something that's a little bit different, and I started this with our professional development day last week. Is that I every now and then want to be able to show and tell a little bit of what we have, especially if you haven't been around campus, during the pandemic or even just around the time that changes may have started trickling in. So today I'm actually joining us from our YNI Moku. And I wanted to share a little bit, again, using the cool technology that we've been able to acquire through CARES, but also to show, our capabilities, but the stuff that we're proud of to show and tell for here in YNI. And so right now I'm standing in an area that we generally classify as YNI, which is some areas and spaces where we have some new office spaces as well as a space where our students can, study and hang out here and there. It's just an amazing space that I'm extremely proud that we have. And I know that many of us haven't necessarily experienced it yet. But I'm here and it's just amazing to see that our students are social distance. And I see our faculty member just walking behind me and trying to stay away from the camera. Um, but this is just something that we've done. We are still social distance. We are still providing our services and carrying out our mission. But I'm just really proud of what we have here at Leeward. And to show and tell a little bit of what we have at Waianae Moku that is really near and dear to my heart. And I spend a lot of time out here. I just enjoy it, having my conversations and seeing what our students are doing. But with that, I do want to move to a little so that I don't disturb our students. Chancellor was too loud. For those of us that are more into the sciences, this is our new science lab out at YNI. And so you could see how cool and the resources that we have available. And so I just wanted to take the first minute or two of our Zoom today to just show and tell, making us really proud of what we have. But as you're probably waiting, we do have some general updates that I'd like to just share for what we've been doing since we last met, as well as answer some questions that I got and I left the printout really far away. Um, that we got through the link originally, and then maybe answer some additional questions or just have discussions of what we may start looking forward to as we continue moving through this pandemic period. And so a couple of just general updates. We continue to host the site for vaccination on our Pearl City campus. And as you've probably been hearing from the media, we've been making some really big leaps in terms of the number of folks that have been vaccinated. Our Leeward Community College community has benefited from us being a site in that we've been extended the opportunity to be vaccinated. UH employees have also come through. We know that we've had DOE employees. And so I'm really happy that we've been a major resource to the state as we're trying to manage through COVID. Um, but more recently, what we've been seeing is a decline in the number of COVID cases reported for the state of Hawaii, an increase in the number of vaccinated people. And in addition to that, a little bit of relieving the valve in terms of the restrictions, statewide restrictions, but more so here in Honolulu. Um, on Oahu, even today, the mayor announced relieving restrictions on the making use of the parks for some sports to take place. And it's just an indicator that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I think the light is a little bit brighter now than it has been in recent weeks and months. And so for the most part, we have been managing really well, and I'm really grateful for what everyone has been doing. I think that we are a resilient bunch. We've managed to move things online, go hybrid, address some of new student challenges, and still deliver our mission. But we are now beginning to do this more or less return back to whatever the new normal is going to look like, because we just don't know how it would all stabilize. Um, but from the standpoint of our return, I did get a couple of questions that are really difficult to answer from my standpoint, at least today. Some of the questions that we've gotten is, what does the new normal look like? And are we going to expect that everyone, including students, must be vaccinated for us to return to campus? So that question I got in multiple iterations, but the very same question. And I don't necessarily have an answer at this point. I think that nationally, what we've been trying to do, or what they've been trying to do, is to get the masses vaccinated so that there is a masses immunity where the majority of people may be immune, and therefore any real cases of COVID is something that the healthcare systems are going to more or less be able to manage. And so right now, I don't have an answer of whether it will be a requirement or not. That's something that may need to be legislated before we could apply it as a set expectation. But we do know that a lot of people have been vaccinated. President Lassner and Vice President LaCroix have shared that they would like to see a little bit more of a mix in the fall, right? A little bit more than we've had in terms of a presence on campus. But we still need to be a little bit vigilant, because what we don't want to do is drop our guard and then have major issues on campus, any of our sites. And so, work with your division chairs and the deans and our vice chancellors to figure out what the best model for instruction is going to look like. But what we do know is that we need to start rolling back in some capacity. And so that's why I'm kind of going everywhere and trying to do a little bit of show and tell too, to give that insight to some type of return. I'll speak a little bit about, so relative to the immunity. So again, because of the different variants and different ways in which bodies respond to the viruses, being vaccinated doesn't necessarily mean that nothing's going to go wrong. But it does provide, I think that one of the challenges that we have had and why we are responding to the virus as a pandemic is because of our hospital capacity, not so much because of immunity and or infection by the virus. It's a matter of how, what we're capable of managing on a day-to-day, like would be for almost any other virus. And so, yeah, so being vaccinated doesn't mean that there's immunity, but there could be mass immunities in that a lot of people aren't going to be reacting the way that we are reacting if we get infected without the vaccination, as a community, not as an individual. And so what I wanted to share next is a little bit about the financial picture. I've been more or less keeping the college updated on this, and it's been a roller coaster to say the least. We're not out of trouble per se, but it is looking a lot more optimistic. And I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. For some of you, this may be a repeat, and I'm sorry. A couple of things. From last year, we knew that there were going to be, that the state was going to do a budget cut in the ballpark of about $78 million from the University of Hawaii. And we've been managing and putting out plans on how we could address some of the budgetary shortfalls. This budget cut to the university and to other state entities, a result of the loss in revenue from the state. And so what we've been seeing from the time that the initial announcement had been made through now was that late last year, we were preparing for employee furloughs. And then those were frozen at least until this summer, given some of the federal stimulus packages. More recently, we have heard from the Council on Revenues that it's looking a little bit more optimistic than was initially calculated. And so between the new revision from the Council of Revenues on what the state will be getting in revenue, plus the stimulus packages that we have gotten already as a state, and those that we are projecting that we're gonna get, it does look a little bit more optimistic. That doesn't mean that it's not gonna be a really difficult set of years, because stimulus monies is a one-time bailout. It doesn't address long-term challenges. And so as a university, we are still gonna continue working and having conversations on how we can maybe streamline a little bit more and have some efficiencies. I do think, though, that maybe the timeline would fall into a situation where we could be a little more strategic and a little less reactive. But those conversations will continue happening until we know differently. As of today, we still are projecting out having a $78 million deficit to the university. That number hasn't been updated. And until that happens, we really need to continue working toward managing that situation. On the other hand, the federal government has provided stimulus dollars in multiple capacities. Some that have reached individuals, by way of stimulus checks, and others that have gone directly to, say, for instance, higher education institutions like Leeward, to help support our students in their quest for their education, as well as support the institution manage our new expenses due to COVID-19. And so if you recall back, we initially were talking about CARES money. Well, as a quick update on CARES money, there were 3 rounds of it. The first one was $1 million that we cut out checks directly to students. The second one was $1 million that helped us get all of this cool stuff that we have in just about every office to help disinfect and clean, as well as additional resources to have a more friendly and yet safer environment for services that we still deliver on campus. And then we had an additional $1.8 million to help support our institution and our students, and that was CARES 3. And so through these 3 rounds of monies, a lot of money has gone to students, and a lot of money has gone to technology that allows me to do this type of Zoom presentation while being able to wheel myself around and being able to provide this hybrid learning environment to instructors that want to use it. I shared the example last Friday. I used the very same camera and I presented from our theater. And you could do so from, say, the Shade House or anywhere else, provided that other things are available. So we are upping on our bandwidth. And I don't understand that technology, so I may be chewing over what we were really doing there, but definitely on bandwidth, Wi-Fi access, having more spaces where our students and ourselves can take advantage of these resources. So there have been quite a bit of expenses. In addition to that, we've had structural changes to our networking and storage capacity for online instruction, given that we did move online pretty rapidly. So I'll pause there for a second because we have gone pretty far in spending out our monies. The most recent expenses come from a new wave of stimulus dollars that we're providing to our students. The students can apply for up to $1,000 from the remaining balance from CARES 3 to address any of the challenges that the pandemic has presented to them. And so our students are going through that process. We will have a better idea of how much we've gone through when we analyze how many of these applications have been awarded. Some of the challenges, though, that I think have strung along from the very beginning of CARES is eligibility for the stimulus money, right? It's not just anyone that raises their hand, but it's anyone that raises their hand and qualifies by way of being Title IV eligible. That doesn't mean that you have to get financial aid. It just means that you are eligible to submit a FAFSA. And so a lot of our students are qualified for this funding, but we have a major subset of our students that aren't. And that may be a campaign that we're trying to work on to see if we could get our existing students to go through the process of becoming qualified so that they could benefit from these resources. Those expectations and requirements from the federal government have softened up a little bit, but remain there. So we are held to a very small framework of things that we could use the CARES money for. And so back in December, we had been getting questions about, could we use the CARES funding to plug a hole that we're getting from the state? And the answer to that is no, primarily because we can't theoretically supplant and we can't use the CARES money to cover expenses that otherwise the state should have appropriated. And so that's why we have found ourselves in this puzzling situation. The state, however, has received stimulus dollars that can be used to plug some holes. It's just that our holes are pretty big in Hawaii, given our dependency into tourism. And so what has happened from in the last month or so is that we have become aware of an additional wave of funding that we've begun receiving or we've been notified about. So that you know, there is the CRRSA funding. Similar to CARES, there's 3 buckets of this money. We are going to receive an additional $1 million that is going to need to go directly to our students, right? Then we're going to receive an additional $3.8 million that is to help us work through whatever it is that we need to do to come back, right? Because we know that at this point, we are going to be waving back onto campus operations in a more robust capacity. And so I say that because back in March and April, when we were planning for a fall return, we were all planning on how we would do this. Having plexiglass, having sanitizers everywhere, 6-foot distancing between seats and whatnot. Well, now things are changing a little bit because the dynamics of the pandemic are a little bit different. So we're going to be getting additional guidance on what we need to do for anything that happens on site, moving forward. And so now with new guidelines, which shouldn't change dramatically, but because we are moving in this direction, we will need to spend some of the money on getting us more or less back in some capacity to campus. And we were made aware rather recently that there is an additional $3.5 million that we are receiving as a minority serving institution to help continue support our students' quest for their education during this pandemic. And so the expenses still have to tie to something related to the pandemic. And so we have sought out CARES requests, and we've gotten a lot of ideas. And in some instances, we've been able to fund. In other instances, we've asked for maybe, redoing of the proposals. But we have been able to do a lot of very creative things. And I've shared some of them already, whether it's an ukulele or, or maybe a mobile telescope or something. These things are helping deliver instruction in a distance capacity, deliver instruction to helping students feel a little bit more secure about what they may be doing while getting this instruction in a more distant way. And so that's where we are with CRRSA funding, right? Now, you probably got an email earlier today from President Lasner that spoke of this $1.9 trillion stimulus that was recently signed. This $1.9 trillion in stimulus funding includes additional funding for higher ed. Now, I have seen a couple of different numbers, so I don't want to be held responsible for the number that I'm going to share. But I think that the state of Hawaii for higher education will be receiving in the ballpark of $95 million thereabouts, of which we are part of, right? So we're not getting 95 million, but we'll get a slice of that pie. There may be even more money coming in, especially for minority serving institutions, again, to help us support and mitigate what we've been challenged with. And so now we have opportunities to strategize and look ahead and prepare ourselves to continue delivering in our mission. And so one of the messages that I wanted to more or less share more publicly is that we have to start now working our way to coming back to campus in a more robust way. So I see a question on using CARES money for writing center and or math lab, for example. That's a little bit broad, but more specific ideas, it's quite possible that we may be able to do that. As examples, I think that, I don't know if it's chemistry or some other science that I've seen some of the CARES proposals may have gotten lab kits and whatnot to help support this transition to hybrid and online. And so we may have some capacity there. I do want to plug in very briefly something that has come up in a couple of different conversations, and I want you guys to hear it directly from me. While we are funding some CARES requests, we are being very careful at funding everything, especially if it's related to technology. Very early in this process, I started raising my eyebrows because I worry about bringing in an additional 300 computers in one surge, so that over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to need to find non-CARES dollars to replenish that technology. That's very difficult to do. And so what I have asked my admin team is to be vigilant on what we are purchasing, because we may be setting ourselves up to be in a major hole in a couple of years. And so I'd rather it be replacing some existing technology rather than adding new, and replacing technology that is going to be used and has a certain life cycle to it, because we may not have this type. It's not may. We'll likely not have the type of funding that we've had right now to fund some of this technology, which is why it's a little bit difficult to just say yes to all requests. Additionally, we're trying to support our faculty and our staff with technology that may be lendable, versus having everyone have the very same replicate of the technology, just because, again, we're adding volume, and at some point that volume is going to need to be replenished. And so we could be more creative on this funding, but we also have to be very diligent in what I just shared before, that we are trying to come back to campus. Last Friday was really nice because I saw a lot of faces that I hadn't seen in a while. And so I think that we're all beginning to feel a level of comfort for the return. We just can't drop our guard. So if you notice, when I went outside and I was in that general area at Waianaimoku, I was wearing my mask. I'm only taking it off while in the classroom. And that's generally because, we really can't drop our guard. We've made a lot of progress, and I want us to maintain that progress. Okay, I see that folks are being a little bit active on the chat, and I'm not able to easily keep up. But yeah, so I was actually at the student-led workshop last Friday. There are concerns with housing security. And so we can't dictate where and how students use the CARES funding that they receive, but that's why it's being made available, and students may be able to use it for their rent or something else. We realize that it's not a lot. I mean, $1,000 here in Hawaii just doesn't stretch that far. But there will be additional waves. And so we'll continue providing this resource until it's depleted. And we're trying to continue to provide additional supports that we could manage from the college perspective to help support our students in their, in the process of their education. Okay, so one of the questions that came in is, given the Council of Revenues and other additional potential sources of funding, must we continue to move down the path of all of the changes that are being proposed, especially through the memo from UHCC and whatnot? So the reality is that some of these changes may have been warranted pre-COVID. Some of these changes may not happen even if COVID hit us harder. We're doing a pretty thorough exercise, I'm going to call it, where we're reviewing a lot of things to see where we could do a little bit more with maybe a little bit less, so being a little bit more efficient. And so I don't know that we are going to slow down per se our efforts, but what I think may happen is that we may be given a little bit more time to be a little bit more strategic in the changes that may come about. So I don't want us to drop our guard. We do have a memo that Campus Council Ad Hoc Group is reviewing right now based on feedback that many units and programs submitted. And this is intended to provide a feedback that basically say, look, if we make this change, this is a really bad outcome. Or if we make this change, please consider this other item, right? So that the UH leadership can then review, and in part of all of these campus-wide conversations and cross-campus conversations, we could inform some of these changes a little bit more. And so I can't say that we're gonna do away with plans, because we're not quite there yet. And we still, for what it's worth, we are still on that $78 million hit that hasn't been revised yet. Yeah, and so has there been some type of litmus test to see what students really want and what can help, especially given where we are with our applications? And so, boy, this is just leading, you guys are leading my conversation, which is great. So we have had some iterations of where we take the pulse on what students feel and want. And to be honest, there may be other people that are more aware of how the responses are coming through. But what I will tell you is that in my conversations with students, there are two sides to the coin, right? Some students are seeing the benefits of, say, online asynchronous because they could do so many other things and still continue to carry on their education. In other instances, and I stand here at Waianae Moku, which is one of the areas where a lot of students have really suggested they really want more face-to-face. And so, whereas the pandemic is really a difficult time to have, feelers for everything, there's a SESI that's going to go out that's going to have some really good questions that will be really informative to our decision making. But we are going to have students that are going to feel more comfortable with online, and students that are going to want to come back, that we may have lost along the way, or are taking fewer classes because they need the face-to-face interaction. And so a lot of this is really informed by what faculty are feeling or seeing from their students, student behaviors, and what places like here at Waianae Moku, we're kind of getting a feel for it when students are here, even on days that they don't have classes, to use the resources and to have faces available. And something that came up previously is that one of the interesting outcomes from the students is they need a quiet place. And so there are all of these needs that we need to consider. And so while I can't say that a transition to fully face-to-face or to leave a lot online right now, it's a little too premature to have a placeholder. We do know that more face-to-face is going to be necessary. From the community perspective, especially students that are coming out of the DOE, like high school seniors, there have been some anecdotal comments and or briefings that suggest that they didn't necessarily have a wonderful experience online, and so they're not necessarily looking forward to continuing online. And so again, a little bit of both sides, and so a healthier mix would be much better. From the enrollment perspective, some of you have gotten this information directly from me. We are pretty significantly down on our applications. In fact, I would say that we may be about 60% down on our applications compared to where we were last year around the same time. And so that's pretty scary because a lot of the narratives that we're hearing, the more difficult conversations that we hear, whether it's from our Board of Regents, whether it's from the UH leadership or our legislators, are that we need to find a way of balancing the state's budget. And so if enrollment is on a decline, is there a need for, say, 10 UH campuses? Is there a need for 7 community colleges? Do we need 4 community colleges on Oahu? And so the narrative behind enrollment is quite important, not so much because of a headcount perspective, also not so much from the security that say that the administrators have in terms of job security, but more than that is that we have a community that has been impacted by the pandemic, and we need to find a way of addressing some of their needs and continuing to support them, right? And so seeing a decline on applications is an indicator, but what we need to find is the why and try to address it. It hurts me gravely to see that maybe we'll have 2 full years of K-12 graduates that may not know what to do or how to do it because they may not have had their teachers or their counselors or our folks basically nudging them to apply to go to college. And so we need to get that jump started again. And so we need to, tighten our belts and figuring ways in which we could, appeal to more and see if we could get more of the students to apply. It's not a unique issue for Leeward. A lot of the colleges have been seeing a decline in applications. What worries me is that our counterparts on the mainland not only saw a decline in applications, but they've seen double-digit reductions in their enrollment. And that is both from the new student perspective and the continuing student population. We've been able to curb a lot of those statistics. I would hope that we don't fall into any of those statistics so far. And I wish I had some wood to knock on. So if you guys have wood, please knock on wood. We haven't lost our student enrollment headcount. We know that we've seen students take fewer and fewer classes. So we're down on SSH, but we're still pretty flat on headcount. And so what we want to do is continue contributing to our community's needs. And so, if Tad's on the call and other people that I've been sort of nudging, we have some opportunities. I don't know if you've been on campus recently, you've probably seen some of the Waianae Moku big screens on the Pearl City campus, sort of showcasing what we do cool, what's really nice about the college. And these are just opportunities for us to just tell our community, listen, we are here and we have an amazing capacity to support you. So learn more about us and connect with us. In fact, every time I go out and I talk to people, there were folks that were getting the vaccine not that long ago that didn't know that we had an automotive program. And so it's just a really nice opportunity for us to engage with the community, share what we have, and see if we could continue curbing the trends that have been really challenging to the community colleges in the nation. And so, whew, okay. With that, that was one long-winded paragraph. So we continue to make really good progress. I think that we are en route to making some even more meaningful progress. But you all know that this is everyone's responsibility in some capacity. We are ambassadors to Leeward and UH. And so wherever and whenever possible, we try to continue informing people of what we do. And truth be told, I am just so proud of everything that we have that I can't stop talking about it. So I hope that everyone, takes on some of that and continues to share, because our community should know what resources we have. Here, whether it's here at YNI, whether it's on the Puuloa campus, or whether, our upcoming Wahiawa site, the community is who we serve. And so getting them aware of what we have is really empowering. And what's really nice and double-edged sword, right, is that I've been sharing with some of the community organizations, neighborhood boards and chambers and rotaries and whatnot. And for every now and then I get a call, someone asking whether this is something that we do or that would be interested in working with them. And so just opportunities, you guys, to continue doing what we know to do well. And so with that, I did want to comment just a couple of minutes, and I'm being mindful of time. I'm still good. On Friday during the professional development day, Jane opened up the conversation to our strategic planning efforts. And I have shared this with our faculty senate, and I'm sharing it campus-wide. Our strategic planning efforts, again, I haven't been here that long, but from my understanding, we've allowed a lot of the information to trickle from UH and UHCC, defining our tactics, our strategies, and our performance indicators. And so what that does is that it makes it a little bit difficult for us to have our Leeward flavor to it. And so what's going to be important is that we engage as a college community, and that we engage with the communities that we serve to help define what is really empowering and something that we could do over the next 5 years or so. And so we are due for our strategic plan. We are going to align with UHCC's plan, and we are going to align to UH's plan. But we are going to have our own identity and our own plan. What is important to us as a community is what needs to resonate in that strategic plan. And what I've been saying all along, so this is, hopefully not foreshadowing of me falling face first in a couple of years if we haven't been able to do it. But one of the issues with strategic plans is that we tend to do them because we have to do them. And that is an issue that we need to break. It's a trend that we need to break, because a strategic plan should be a guiding light that helps us get to our goals that are defined by those that we serve and those that represent our Leeward Ohana. And so what's important to us need to be set as courageous goals. They have to be aggressive, but we have to be in a capacity to meet them. And so I would never be able to set goals on a strategic plan that depend on so many different variables that the likelihood of us getting to it is impossible. But we are able to identify areas that we could definitely improve on, and hopefully some goals that are truly student-centric, right? And so we need to have our students in mind, what their needs are, what their goals and their aspirations are, and define their strategies based on that and based on how we compare to our peers. And so we're going to be engaging in campus-wide exercises that help us define our strategic plan moving forward. And that's going to be a really influential document that will be part of a lot of things that we tend to do already, whether it is, our typical and traditional assessment or program reviews, ARPDs, budgetary requests, and, prioritizations for the institution. All of these are going to have to embed somewhere in there our strategic plan. And that's how one can truly operationalize a strategic plan. And so at the end of this exercise, I am really hopeful that we as a Leeward community know our strategic plan practically verbatim. That way we know when we are moving the needle in certain areas. That way we know where we need to maybe infuse more resources to get to those to that end. And so I wanted to share that in this campus meeting, because we've been trying to roll it out slowly and expanding, so that when we go through the exercise of really engaging our college community, we're able to fit in things that are truly aspirational and yet achievable. And that we hear the voices from everyone in our community. That's going to be quite important. And so after sharing that, I'm going to take a quick drink of water, scroll through the chat messages. But if you have anything else, any other questions or anything like that, I'm happy to try to provide some answers. Okay, so yes, so let me try to articulate some of the comments that I saw in the chat. Yes, there's definitely messaging out there that implies that we may be cutting programs and or disciplines and whatnot. Some of these decisions, and we know as an academic institution, take a little bit of time in vetting. I can't say that no discipline and no program will get cut. We have to go through exercises and reviewing some of this. Over time, needs do change and we evolve a little bit, but that's not to suggest that I am a proponent of doing any major cuts or anything like that, but just to suggest that over time things do change, and we need to be at the forefront of that change. I agree that if the messaging is really negative over time, there are going to be implications for student enrollment. Although I'm quite hopeful and optimistic that a lot of the messaging is not necessarily, for Leeward, while there are areas that are under scrutiny at Leeward, I think that comparatively speaking to everyone else, we're on pretty solid ground. And so I'm quite hopeful that we're able to weather some of this, but this is something that's truly happening at the national level. A lot of institutions are just looking at what they currently have. And on that same breath, when we look at what happens typically around recessions, it's something that hasn't necessarily hit us yet because the stimulus packages have been infusing a lot of money to the community. And so what tends to happen when individuals are finding themselves out of work and out of financial resources is that they seek opportunities in higher education, right? And then ultimately with the hope of finding a job. And so what Ron put there is pretty important, because what tends to happen around recessions is that institutions that have more offerings on the job ready side of the house, those institutions tend to surge a lot more in enrollment than institutions that have the longer paths to employability. And so the short-term workforce training is quite popular during a recession, and also the career and technical programs, that prepare students to be job ready and in high demand areas become extremely popular. I have shared this in a couple of different instances, and that is that it's concerning to have a large subset of our population working toward transfer degrees, because without having more infused career and technical programming and offering, some students may opt to go wherever institutions are offering more of the job ready programs. But I'm really, really optimistic. Again, I guess I'm a glass half full type of guy. But I'm hopeful that we are able to manage with, the programming that we have and infuse a little bit more and be a little bit more. Actually, our non-credit side has been quite impressive in recent months and just over time in producing programming very quickly, and responsive to needs. And so we've been rewarded through some grant opportunities and helping our students make it through some of these programs. And so in connecting the two comments on the suggestion of, maybe eliminating programs or disciplines with the need to develop additional job ready opportunities, it is an opportunity to how President Lassner has been more or less suggesting it, is to revision the University of Hawaii. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to make really crazy changes and cut ourselves short, but it may mean that it may mean that we may add additional areas or repurpose or revamp what we have. And so we just have opportunities. And so I'm hopeful that we can curb the enrollment trends, but they do look a little bit difficult. So over time, we'll be seeking your support in trying to get the word and message out. I don't know if you guys have been following Leeward social media, but we've been a lot more active recently than we have in recent years. And what makes it even more meaningful to us is if all of you that have social media accounts can connect with the Leeward social media and sort of help the message go even further out. So I encourage everyone to go through their social media and see if you could friend, I think that's what it's called, friend Leeward, and just continue pushing those messages out, because that's how people know about us, especially this new generation that's so tied to social media. And so let me see. All right. So yeah, so we'll continue assessing where our needs are. I don't think that for fall we'll know precisely the formula or ratio, but I know that we're going to need to offer more face-to-face classes and support services for those students that have, that learn better that way. And so yeah, there are students that go on both sides. There are a lot of students that have suggested that online has actually allowed them to continue with their education or even add on more classes because they didn't need to do much of a commute. And so I think that we'll continue serving on in both capacities. All right, any additional questions, concerns? I just want to make sure I covered everything. All right. Well, being respectful of everyone, Sam, I want to thank everyone for your continued commitment. I mean, I still see a lot of people logging into these classes. And by the way, I did want to say that I humbly apologize for scheduling this meeting at this time. I know there were so many conflicts. And some folks actually went about to changing their meetings. Zoom has allowed us to be a little bit more frivolous with our scheduling, and I just pulled that one off. And so I want to thank everyone for committing to this. And I know that some others are in other sessions, and I apologize for that. Hopefully we'll continue moving forward. It's quite important that we, carry on. That's right. You guys did change that time. So yes, that's a good plug there, you guys. There is a session on letting it go and overcoming compassion fatigue. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate what everyone does. Keep up the amazing work. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more people and eventually giving hugs. So mahalo, everyone.